Hi and welcome to the channel. Zach D Productions here, and I'm here for a list video for you guys. It's actually been a long while since I've done one of these list videos. This will be a throwback list video where I go over some albums from a particular year, and yeah, this will be one of those videos. So for this video, I'll be going over, in my opinion, some of the best rock and metal albums of the year 1997. Now keep in mind, this is not a list of the absolute best albums of the year 1997. I would just say that these are some of the best albums of 1997, based on my opinion, of course. So yeah, I have about 6 albums here that I want to go over, and this list is in no particular order either, so let's go ahead and get started. Now the first album here that I want to briefly talk about is the album from Deftones, and this is their second album, Around the Fur. And I know that a lot of people say that this is either their favorite Deftones album or at least one of their favorites. And it is probably my favorite Deftones album, but White Pony is definitely a very close second for me. But yeah, what a strong album this is. Of course, back in the height of nu metal, you could say. Some classics on here, of course, like My Own Summer, probably one of my favorite songs from the band. You got the title track and Be Quiet and Drive Far Away. Yeah, a lot of classics on here. Some of their best songs, I would say, are on this album. But yeah, if you like nu metal or any kind of alternative metal, haven't heard this one, definitely give it a listen. I mean, this album is an essential to check out if you're into that kind of music, I would say. So, Around the Fur by Deftones. Next, this album is by Megadeth, who is probably one of my favorite bands in thrash metal, and the album that they've released in 1997 is Cryptic Writings. Now, this is an album where I think a lot of people say Megadeth kind of fell off. They started becoming, well, not as good as they once were, and while I would agree with that, I still think for the time being, they were still putting out some pretty solid music. Yeah, this is more alternative than thrash, I would say. This was, of course, back in the 90s, and, there were a lot of thrash bands doing this as well, trying to be more commercial, get more radio airplay or whatever, but, this is a pretty good album, even though it's not one of their best. I mean, you got songs like Trust, which is a great song. That's obviously a fan favorite from this. Almost Honest, I think, is pretty good. I'll Get Even is alright. She-Wolf is pretty good as well, but yeah, maybe not Megadeth's best album, but for what it is, not bad. So, Cryptic Writings by Megadeth. This next album here is by Judas Priest, of course, a legendary heavy metal band. This is the first album without Rob Halford in the band. They had Ripper Owens in the band at the time, and I do think that this is the better of the two albums with Owens on vocals. I think many fans can agree with me on that. A lot of people say that this album is good, but the other one with Owens is not so good. And that probably is the case, and the album Judas Priest released in 1997 is Jugulator. And you know what? This is a pretty heavy album, too. Probably one of Priest's heaviest albums, I would say. It's up there with, like, Painkiller and stuff, but yeah. I mean, this album did come out shortly after Painkiller as well, but either way, pretty good album, I'd say. Maybe not their best, and yes, it doesn't have Rob Halford in the band, but, just give it a chance. Just give it a chance. I think it's pretty good for what it is. I mean, you got the title track, Bloodstained, Death Row, and Cathedral Spirals, the closing track, I think, is a pretty cool song as well. But yeah, there you have it. Jugulator by Judas Priest. Next, this next album here is by Fate's Warning, who are one of the pioneers of progressive metal, and they're a pretty underrated band too, I must say. But of course, the album that they've released in 1997 is A Pleasant Shade of Grey, which is their concept album. I have seen people say that this is actually their favorite Fate's Warning album, which that is not something that you see every day, because normally you would see someone go with, maybe Awaken the Guardian or No Exit or Perfect Symmetry or something like that. But very rarely will you see fans place this album at the top of their ranking or whatever. But it's a great album, though. It is. I mean, really cool concept and everything. It's a pretty unique album for the band. My favorite songs, well, in this case, they're all in parts, but my favorite parts on here would have to be parts 2, 3, 6, and the closing track. I'm pretty sure those are the parts that I like the most. I don't know. It's been a while since I've returned to this one. I do need to return to this one again sometime soon, though. But yeah, pretty unique album from the band, like I said, so Pleasant Shade of Grey, Fate's Warning. Next, this album here is by Dream Theater, who is probably my favorite progressive metal band. And this album here, you know, they were more progressive rock than they were progressive metal, but for what the album is, it's pretty good. And that album is Falling Into Infinity by Dream Theater. But yeah, very strong album, I think. Maybe not Dream Theater's best, but I think it's still a very good album. New Millennium, great song, You Not Me, Peruvian Skies, Burning My Soul, Lines in the Sand, Trial of Tears. There's a lot of solid stuff on this album, but yeah. Yeah, maybe not as heavy as what they used to release. A bit more accessible, but pretty solid, I think. Alright, so lastly, this album here is by Genesis, who I think is one of the greatest progressive rock bands. This album here I would not say is prog rock, though, and this is the last album from Genesis that they've ever released, and it's also the only album featuring Ray on vocals after Phil Collins left. But yeah, so the album Genesis released in 1997 is their final studio album, Calling All Stations. This is one of Genesis's more darker sounding albums too. That is something that is worth pointing out. It definitely sounds of its time, it does, but you know, I think it's alright. Yeah, it's maybe one of Genesis's weakest albums. That is something that I will say. But is the album bad? No, I don't think so. The title track, great song. Congo, maybe my favorite on here. Shipwrecked, pretty good song, I'd say. Dividing Line, pretty good as well. I mean, yeah, there's a few good tracks on here. Now, obviously, yes, there are a few skippable tracks on the album. Some songs that do lack replay value, but the album isn't all bad, though, so yeah. Genesis, Calling All Stations, so there you have it. That's a list of, in my opinion, some of the best rock and metal albums of 1997. Feel free to let me know what you think. What are some of your favorite rock and metal albums of 1997? Feel free to let me know. So on that note, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day and take care.